Good evening and welcome to Ville News. I'm Emma Hazard alongside Paige Davis, here to give you the latest local, state, and national headlines.
Coming up, we have updates on the presidential election and rising Halloween candy prices. Stay tuned because Ville News starts now.
Donald Trump held a controversial rally in New York City's Madison Square Garden on October 27th. The former president, who is in the final days of his campaign to return to the White House, held a rally in the famous venue despite the state of New York being a safe bet for Vice President Kamala Harris. The rally, which featured dozens of Trump allies, received national scrutiny from the inflammatory rhetoric of various speakers. Trump advisor Stephen Miller said, quote, "America is for Americans and Americans only," end quote. Financial influencer Grant Cardone, when describing Democrats, said, quote, "We need to slaughter those people," end quote. Most controversially, comedian Tony Hinchcliffe's portrayal of Puerto Rico as a, quote, "floating island of garbage," end quote, received widespread commendation from all sides of the political spectrum. The rally was compared to Nazi rallies held in MSG by VP nominee Tim Walz and former presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. Additional speakers included J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, Phil McGraw, and members of Trump's family.
Did your Halloween sweets look scarily expensive? Due to reoccurring poor crop seasons, cocoa prices have risen nearly by 45% from January to September. These prices were seen at a 47-year record high in February of this year. As reported by the Wells Fargo Agri-Food Institute, next year will be the third consecutive year of these failed harvests. The reason for these failures is due to sporadic weather conditions. Last year, West Africa dealt with disease in crops from a heavy rain season, and this year was impacted by dry temperatures and winds from El Nino, a global climate phenomenon of irregular patterns. In an attempt to save more cocoa for the following harvest, African and South American region farmers have increased the count of cocoa tree planting. While still trying to recover from major losses, the cocoa industry has experienced a 5% drop in unit purchases, as well as an increase of 1.5% in dollar sales. Chocolate candy manufacturers have been seen adding different variations of candies to their brands. For example, Hershey's recently added Jolly Rancher robes and Shakalicious gummies. As companies are changing their focus to more non-chocolate sweets, consumers can only hope to see a drop in costs for chocolates in the near future.
When we get back, updates on a Philadelphia police officer death and a PA state band's performance. Ville News will be right back. On October 21st, Allegheny County Police Department received a 911 notification that a 44-year-old man was injured alongside Montour Trail in Moon Township. The man was identified as Liquor Enforcement Officer Benjamin Brallier. Brallier was then taken to the hospital where he was pronounced deceased with a stab wound. Anthony Queeson has been charged with criminal homicide in relation to the case. Queeson is being held at the Allegheny County Jail without bail. State police said in a statement following Brallier's death, quote, "The Pennsylvania State Police continues to mourn the loss of Liquor Enforcement Officer Benjamin Brallier, who was tragically killed while off duty. Brallier served with honor for over 20 years. He was not only an exemplary officer, but also a devoted husband and father," end quote. Officer Brallier is survived by his wife and 2 daughters.
The Harrisburg High School marching band greeted supporters of presidential candidate and Vice President Kamala Harris at a campaign rally this past week. The campaign event occurred less than a week before the election day. The students played as attendees entered the expo hall at the Pennsylvania Farm Show complex. The polls continue to show a tight race as we enter the first week of November. Between Democratic nominees Harris and Republican candidate Donald Trump, due to Pennsylvania's recognition as a swing state, both presidential candidates have been making their respective appearances in multiple PA counties to try to gain votes.
When we get back, we'll have updates on a campus intersection closure and a visit by Senator Bernie Sanders. Ville News will be right back.
A rollover crash on North George Street left the main intersection of campus closed for over an hour this past Tuesday. A Hyundai Tucson had just stopped right before the crosswalk to let students cross the street from the Hash building to the library. Layla Medina, an eyewitness at the scene, recalled, quote, "An old man had stopped for me and my classmate. We were a little bit before the yellow line, and some lady tried to get around him. And when trying to go around him, her car flipped." End quote. The driver of a Honda Civic pulled out of McHugh Street, attempting to pass the Tucson at 40 miles per hour before the pedestrians could cross, but in the process, struck the Tucson, rolled over 3 times, and narrowly missed pedestrians. The car was cleared out of the intersection shortly before 5:15, allowing the road to be reopened.
On Sunday, October 27th, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders was at the Ware Center having a discussion with Millersville students about important issues in this election, such as student loan forgiveness, Israel and Palestine, tax breaks, and so much more. This event was specifically targeted towards university students, as there wasn't even a public post about the event on the PA Dems website. That way, it would allow for more young voters to be able to attend the event. This is Bernie's second time being in Millersville to talk to young voters about the election, with previous time being back in 2016. Sanders himself even said, quote, "When people come together, change can take place," end quote. 2 members from our Ville News crew had the opportunity to go to this event and see what Senator Sanders had to talk about. Let's see it. Over to Sydni, Chieffo, and Payje Davis for a recap on this event.
I'm Sydni, Chieffo, reporting from Lancaster City at the Ware Center. Today we watched Bernie Sanders as he talked to young voters about the importance of voting within the Harris and Walz campaign.
Uneducated people will tell you how stupid education is because they don't have the education to appreciate what education can do. But it becomes a political issue and a cultural issue. I don't have any magical answers, but it's one, our position should be, it seems to me, that education and intellectual growth is a lifetime job. It's something we should be doing all of our lives.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. It was a small group of people. There wasn't a lot of people there. I was expecting a lot more, especially for someone as high profile as, Bernie is. And I thought his thoughts on, the topics surrounding the upcoming election were very nuanced. They were very original. And I really do think that, even though he's getting up there in age and he's old and, he's still got a place in government, I think he's still like a major player and he has a lot of influence on how the election turns out.
When people come together, change can take place. Change always takes place, not from the top on down, but from the bottom on up.
We are now leaving the Ware Center, where we just saw Bernie Sanders speak about important issues regarding this year's election and why it is so important to go out and vote on November 5th if you haven't voted already. I'm Payje Davis with Ville News, and that's all we have today.
That's all we have time for this week on Ville News. Thanks for watching, and make sure to tune in next week for the latest local, state, and national headlines.